You must be prepared for this industry. You must have the staff strength and the credibility and the history and the liability and the brand equity that goes with it. I meet so many people that want to say, oh, we want to get into the education business. You know, we think management education is a great business. Will you join us? And I say, well, so what's your background? Oh, you know, we are in the construction business. We are in the entertainment business. Yeah, we are investors. You know, hello. To be successful in this industry, one of the CSFs, you need to live it. Management education is like a faith. It's like a following. It's got to be in your blood. You need to be passionate about it to be able to share. And if you share, it shows you care. And that's what makes a big difference, rather than people coming along and delivering a module for 2 hours and then forgetting all about it. That's not what the critical success factors are. You must have skilled, adequate, competent resourcing, capacity, credibility, competency, and all those C's that I mentioned earlier on. This is what the industry CSFs are. Now, that doesn't make you any better or any worse. It just means that you can play in this game. Now, from a strategy point of view, I go beyond CSFs. And I take CSFs, calibrate them, and then I look at KSFs, key success factors. Now, you think they're the same, and some authors believe they're the same. I don't think they're the same. So here I'm coming from. What are the factors that you need to have to be in this industry? Okay. Secondly, what is going to make you different from the others? What is key for you? What does your business depend on? And it depends on differentiation. Now, we are moving into a world that is full of commodity providers. Sad, but that's the reality. And it's only the small businesses that are providing for local needs, wants, values, and expectations. So if that is the case, how are we different locally from the others locally? How are we different globally from the others? And this is where Mintzberg's thinking comes in from yesterday, that our strategy for positioning becomes important. Our strategy planning ahead, our patterns of performance become important because they must be different from the others. So this is where the strategic thinking needs to come in. Not how we differentiate it, but how is it what we do that keeps customers coming back again and again and again, to build up customer value through customer loyalty. That's what these CSFs are about. And that's what you need to advise your client on, because otherwise there's no point in putting together a new strategy, a transformation strategy, unless this is in place. Okay, so we can then move, and I've given you examples in the manual so you can go through and read that. It's all good bedtime reading. Let's go on to pestle analysis, because this is a framework that has emerged over the years. When I was a student, I was taught PEST, political, economic, social, and technological factors. And then the literature added legal and ecological, and all of this type of thing continues to develop as a mnemonic. It's a framework. It's like the 4 Ps. You know, if you like that, you can use it. You know, you have to start somewhere. And then this work that I mentioned to you yesterday, that's got to go over to Coca-Cola in the UK. I was thinking about areas in which product improvement is needed. And I went back initially in my mind to the 4 Ps of marketing. I then threw it away. But it's there. It's just like pest and pestle. It's there, but do you ever use it? Well, maybe it's helpful. The only place that I think pest analysis is quite useful is if you're doing overseas market entry. So let's assume that I want to open a Westminster College in Myanmar. What analysis would I do? I'd have a look at the size of the market, the volume of the market, the level of competition, all the things that we've mentioned. But I would then use PESTLE. Because in Myanmar, what is the political situation? Very unstable. What is the economic situation? Not good. What are the subcultural problems? There's all sorts of subcultural problems with different ethnic groups. I don't need to go any further. I don't need to look at technology, etc. Already, it's no go, no go, no go. So it's quite a useful checklist. So what I would do with my PESTLE analysis is simply do a go, no go, tick the box against each of those 6 elements. So Myanmar is off the radar. I went through the same thing with Vietnam about 15 years ago. And it's no go, no go, no go, no go, no go, go. Not enough. Today, I would say, is it politically stable? Yes. Is the economy growing? Yes. Are there subcultural issues? Not substantial anymore. Are they growing in technology? Definitely. Legislation? Well, probably there is the problem because it's a very bureaucratic country. So I've got a bit of a problem. So out of my 6 elements, only 1 is discouraging. So this is an interesting way of doing your pest analysis without getting bogged down into too much detail, far too much detail. Okay, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on these analyses because I'm sure you've seen and heard them before. But scenario building, we do need to have a look at because this does come up, on the 3rd part of task 2. So, what's scenario analysis, fundamentally all about? And it's on page 51 here in the manual, 51 and 52 and 53. Now, this form of analysis was very, very popular back in the 80s and the 90s, where companies would be going away on management retreats to do scenario analysis. And it was a lot of fun, and I can remember being involved in these things. And yeah, it has its view. So I'm more interested in the mindset that goes around scenario building, which is all about how can we anticipate the future. We could do a scenario analysis now by saying, okay, let's look at Malaysia. Let's have a look at your respective industries, and we break the country down into its core industries, such as oil and gas, agriculture, palm oil, rubber, and so on. We can say, okay, let's just take 4 industries. What is the likely future over the next 10 years for those industries? What's going to happen to the demand for palm oil? And what's going to have a look at our provisions? So if we're thinking about Felder or FGV, and FGV is a client of mine, and we start looking and saying, okay, what is the future scenario going to be? The future scenario will be looking at the demand-supply equation. Where is sustainable demand coming from? Where is the demand for value-added products coming from? Where is the demand for moving downstream coming from? And then what is our provision? because we have got so much of this country covered with palms that are yielding the fruit that deliver the oil. But what about the productivity? It's going down. The palms are aging. So now there has to be replanting and regrowth, which means taking off even more land by moving upstream. So there are the scenarios, let's say for FGV, fulfill the business. What is the downstream scenario? Going into value-added products such as oils and stuff like that, and even competing with your own customers like Nestle, but not very sensible. The second scenario is the mainstream scenario that they're currently in. And the third scenario is moving upstream into considering how we can be more productive, get a higher yield. Now, those scenarios I have talked to FGB about, and it's not unusual because it's also been in the public domain, it's been in the press, so I've got no worries about sharing this with you. But this is scenario building. Let's have a look at what those future three scenarios are. Mainstream, upstream, downstream. Now, let's assess those scenarios. And let's work out what the longer term is likely to be. So this is called scenario analysis. So on page 53, I've explained to you a very simple 7-stage sequence for scenario analysis. Okay, firstly, what is the scenario? Upstream, downstream, mainstream. What has caused this? What is driving the need to review these scenarios? Obviously, profitability, productivity, shareholder value, stakeholder value, global positioning, political respect, and so on and so forth. Probably 10 criteria. Okay. Now, the next thing is where we have got to put hand on heart and say, well, okay, what is the likely outcome arising from the stated scenario? Now, the new CEO that went into FGV was very keen to move downstream, and that was in the press. So the likely outcome of Felder's products through FGV moving downstream is quite likely because the CEO has got expertise and competency in that area. But does the organization have the expertise? Does it have the capacity? Does it have the resource base? Are they ready? Will they be resilient there? Hello. Now, this is me playing devil's advocate. Now, I'm saying this to you for a very good reason. New strategies are great ideas, wonderful wishful thinking, but will they become a reality? And the answer to that must be in answering the points I just made. This is what scenario building is about. So your assignment is actually saying, well, okay, as a consultant, what are the probable industry scenarios going to face the company? Now, yeah, okay. But now, what about the company's response? There has to be a strategic response. So does it mean that they're going to support their core business? Further support their core business? Elaborate or modify their core business? Something we have to think about. Now, fourth thing in scenario analysis is what is going to be the positive and negative effects on the business. And what is going to be the impact upon the business. And then, if we're going to adopt that scenario, what do we have to change? in terms of our strategies, our structures, our processes, the technology, our people, our infrastructure. And then finally, okay, if we're going to do this, what are our first steps? I always like this jargon. What are our first steps? What are we going to do now? But I don't want to make it too difficult. So having been involved in putting together, new strategies and strategic plans inside, and to facilitate this with FGV, what becomes important for them is, okay, we have it now. What are your next steps? What are your first steps that need to be taken by division? Maybe we've got to address the culture. Or maybe we just have to let it evolve. Or maybe the first step is on performance. Maybe we have to change the KPIs. Now, this is all part of what we call a transitioning agenda to bring about needed change. Okay, so now you've got an understanding about how to do that scenario analysis. We used to run programs, in the past on scenario building. People love it because they're taking themselves away from their 8 to 6 mundane job tied to a particular job function. What I found in doing this, and just to share with you, it's great to use interfunctional or cross-functional teams to get different ideas and different perspectives. So as we're involved in digital transformation projects, I always bring together the people from different departments to come together and to present them what the picture of digital transformation is fundamentally all about. Bring people together for a first meeting to have an internal open-ended discussion, to get an understanding from them about the future scenario, and then the difficulties that they're going to face with it, the pain points. Now, why? Scenario building, guys, leads directly into change management. Because stage 6 in scenario planning is, okay, what needs to change? Now, the jargon, or rather the language that I use, is not about what needs to change. It's not powerful enough. What must change? What must change? That makes it imperative. Otherwise, all of this is wonderful wishful thinking and wasting a lot of management time. So then, if we know what must change, we can start to prepare for it in putting together the essential transformation plans. So this is where scenario planning is actually quite useful, because scenario planning will engage the organization and then drive it forward to taking the necessary steps. So I'd commend scenario planning to you. It's a lot of fun. You need to be away from your current environment to open up the mind. We've got a piece of work on, probably about 2 years job actually, with a big tire company here, which will be starting very soon. But in order to get this whole thing started, we need top management team away from the manufacturing plant, away from the pressures of day to day, because we've now really got to think about the future competitive, not just for Malaysia, but to have a look at their positioning in the industry globally. You can't do that stuck in the work environment. Now, everything is on hold because of MCO, and we should have already have done this 2 months ago, but we're still waiting now for MCO to lift, and that might not now be till next year. So again, scenario planning will come into that, because we need to get a vision for the options and which way is going to be important, moving forward. So I would commend scenario planning for you. Be careful with pestle analysis. CSF analysis, very, very important. Very, very important. And I not only do we want to know how we can fail to prevent it, but we also want to know what are the essential conditions for us to remain in this industry, first thing. Secondly, is what are those conditions that relate to us as a company that keep us there? Okay, good. So that's got us sort of underway. We need to move on to other tools that you can use in your assignment. And I think what we'll do, Mohan, we'll take our 10-minute break now. And when we come back, I'm going to look at Porter's work so that we can start looking at the value of that to help you to answer the assignment.
Okay,
so
no worries.
See you guys in 10 minutes. Just take a break, get a cup of tea, cup of coffee, stretch your legs, put your eyes somewhere away from the screen, because with all this zooming, our eye health is getting affected. So always start looking around, change the distance of the eyes. If you're near a window, start looking out of the window during this time, because that will re-engage your eye muscles. Okay, see you in 10 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. We're going now into our second session that will take us up to the end of our first session this morning. Now, I need to go into looking at some more work on the techniques and the tools that are used for external environmental analysis. And with that respect, I want to have a look at things like competitive benchmarking, Porter's work, and so on. Let's just deal with the manual first so that you know where we are. We're moving on to page 58 and into that next section. And let's just deal with the competition first. Now, I don't need to be teaching grandmother to suck eggs on how to look at your competitors. I'm sure you are all aware of that. But what is becoming something of an ism is that a lot of companies now seem to think that the way ahead is to benchmark against the competitors. You know, I've been as a consultant to this hospital I mentioned for many years. And even in the last work that I just submitted, they use external consultants for IT, external consultants for HR, and myself as a strategist. And one of the new consultants that came in, he asked me, he said, so could you explain, Dr. Lester, who are we benchmarking against? And I said, why are we asking that question? And he said, well, maybe we can learn from our competitors. And I said to him, I said, you know, this hospital has been in business for over 100 years, and we're in a very distinct position. It's not going to be helpful to be just like our competitors. And it went very quiet. Now, here's my point. This is where people get benchmarking wrong. Yes, you could learn from your competitors, but you don't want to be just like them. We did some work for a bank in Sri Lanka called Sampath Bank. And my job was to do a benchmarking study against Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank because they want to become just like them. And I said, thank you very much, but I'm going to refer this work to other people. I think it's a complete and utter waste of time. And they said, why? I said, because you'll never, ever be like an international bank because you're a local bank and you've got different profile of customers. So I said, let's just take a test. Why do you want to benchmark against HSBC? They said, we want to grow. We've got to give dividends to shareholders. We need to grow our business. So therefore, we need to learn from them. And I said, are there not other local competitors you can learn from? Yeah, but I think we're better than them. So we've got to learn from the international boys. That was the argument. I said, okay. So could you give me one simple equation? Product utilization by customer, by segment. Meaning, you segment your market into business and non-business, into high net worth individuals, etc., into business markets, B2C markets, and so on. You've done all that. I've seen all that. Looks good. I want to take that customer base and cross-reference it to the product utilization. And the score, I'm sharing the figures with you, the score was 1.7, meaning that in every customer the bank has, on average, they're taking less than 2 of the bank's product. The opportunity for cross-selling is amazing, but it's not happening. And I just said to them, you know, even if you start an internal cross-selling function between divisions, your product utilization by customer is going to go up to in excess of 2. But my question to you is, do you have the capacity for that growth? And he said to me, yeah, of course we do. I said, you know, that is an interesting response, but do you know that you have the capacity? And he went quiet. I said, okay, let me tell you about Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank by segment and give you some idea about product utilization by customer segment. And I shared those figures. If you want to be like them, You're going to have to grow your business from where it is now 2 to 2.5 times. Do you have the capacity? And it went quiet. I said, before we even begin to move on with competitive benchmarking, why don't we have an internal meeting? I will specify the analysis that I need, and then you can make the decision whether we are doing the right thing. And I would do this pro bono. I would do this free. And if we've got something meaningful to work to, fine, you can pay me retrospectively for this work, but I want to prove you wrong. Now, this is a consultant's job, but it's not a nice thing for consultants to do, because consultants also want to earn money. So the easy way of just saying, yes, we'll do this for you, but I know from experience that it's going to stall, it's not going to be any use. So I'd much rather put the client into a position of reconsidering before they move forward. Okay, so they did the analysis, and they brought in the heads of department and said, okay, if we grow from 1.7 to 2.5, what is the impact that have on banking processes? And everyone had a very long face. We can't do it. We don't have the capacity. A lot of our systems are still analog. We just don't have the capacity, and we're not going to have the capacity. Okay, so let's forget competitive benchmarking against Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. So then, the CEO got egg on his face. He felt embarrassed. I said, there's no need for embarrassment. This is what management and strategic management is about. We're all here to learn. We're all here to make the right decisions and to use the resources of the bank to deliver shareholder return, right? Yes, okay. Now, let's look at other industries that we can learn from. If you want to grow your business, you've got to build a closer bond with your customer base. What businesses or even industries do you know that are doing a really good customer service job? Let's learn from them. And we did that. And then the CEO, thanked me a lot, because they've now since moved on. Sampath Bank has now got a lot of stature, in the Sri Lankan local market. I did a similar job on benchmarking in Hong Kong for a cement company that produces aggregate for short order, aggregate going into small builders and people that are laying down paths, pathways, driveways, and different end-use applications. And the company is about to fold. And they've got competition from mainland China, selling the same product at much cheaper price, but customer service lousy. So the CEO happened to be on my MBA course in Hong Kong. He said, look, I listened to what I have to say. I think you make a lot of sense. And can you help us? I said, by all means, I'll come to your office, tomorrow before I fly back to Singapore. And I could see the reason they're losing business. One answer, responsiveness. I said, the problem is your customers can't order from you. Make it simple. Make it easy. He said, well, how do I do that? I said, let's just walk across the road to McDonald's and come with me. He did. I said, okay, so what would you like? He said, I'll have a Big Mac and fries. I said, okay, I'll have a filet fish and fries. So we're at the counter. I ordered the two products, and within 3.5 minutes, because I timed it, everything is there, and we're sitting down and eating. And he said to me, why did you bring me here? I hate McDonald's. I said, so do I. But I'll have it once a year, just for fun. He said, I'm not with you. I said, good. I've got your attention. What just happened? He said, we ordered burgers. I said, no. What just happened? How quickly did we get our burger? Oh, he said, within a few minutes. How quickly did McDonald's respond to your order? He said, immediately. And what made it easy for them to serve your order? We asked for a number 1 and a number 3 off the menu board, right? Yes. I didn't even ask them for a Big Mac and a filet of fish with chips. I just said, I want a number 1 and number 3. And I paid them and we're sitting down. This is where your business is failing. Your responsiveness is lousy. And I've tested this as a mystery shopper to get other people, local people from Hong Kong, phoning your company, trying to place an order. They have an immense amount of difficulty in getting through, getting the order placed. And from what I understand, it is even wrong. So this is what we call competitive benchmarking. So you said, in 15 minutes, I've learned more from you than I could have learned, and my business was about to go bust. What do we do next? I said, good, now you understand next steps. Take your mobile phone, take a photograph of that menu board. Let's go back into the company. Let's bring our salespeople together and redesign the ordering system so that when people want to buy short order concrete with aggregate from you, the size of the aggregate is just like the different menus on a McDonald's board. He said, thank you so much. I said, my job is done. You don't need a consultant. You just need a bit of advice. And the business was turned around. So I'm just sharing these things with you because otherwise, if I'm not here to share stories with you, a lot of people can read the manual with you. And I wrote the manual for you, but I don't need to read it with you. You can read it very well. I need to elaborate it, to bring it to life for you. So this is my take on competitive benchmarking. My sincere advice to you is look at other industries that are successful for some reason that is their critical factor for success. And it could be customer service. It could be product quality. It could be a number of things. But this is where we learn. I was involved with Glen Eagles Hospital down in Singapore under Parkway for a number of years, doing international roller, international conferences, etc., again as a consultant. And I learned a lot about customer service from Citibank. And the ideas that I got from Citibank, I could then use in the hospital to understand service. You see? Responsiveness is important. You learn a lot from insurance companies. Driving sales, insurance company model works very well, providing you deliver on your promise to salespeople. Can you see where I'm coming from? So this is what competitive benchmarking is about. Don't look at your competitors because you come just like them and they'll be a lot better than you. I went into Saudi Arabia to do a benchmarking study. And my job was to work with a company called Herfy, who are in market leadership positions. They also want to grow. They want to be able to open in Dubai and so on and so forth, but they feel that McDonald's have got a better business model. So you're wasting your time. You'll never be like that. You don't have the scale advantages. So what is it you want to do? Same thing. We need to grow. And I asked them why. And then I asked them, so who are your core customer groups? And why do they keep coming back? It's about taste. It's about culture. All those type of things. Nothing to do with what McDonald's. McDonald's is a universal culture. You are an Arabic culture. So let's go back and think about what else that you can do. It was quite interesting because the culture is very much people come out maybe at 11 o'clock at night, drive up and sometimes drive through, order burgers or pizzas or whatever it may well be with gallons of Pepsi and go home and watch movies until 3 o'clock in the morning. And the waste tends to expand. And obesity is a big problem in Saudi Arabia. I said to them, when I go through all of your stores, they're always empty, whatever time of day or night, because people just drive through. So you've got space here that is not being used. Yeah, you're right. So what can we do with that space to bring in the crowds? Why don't we think about in-store vibrancy? Why don't we start thinking about putting in some machines that will bring people to come in, just like we would do in pubs in England where the gaming machines, the one-armed bandits, pull the crowd for people that want to come in and drink. Ah. How do you think like this? Because we never thought about doing that. That's why you need a consultant, because consultants will do the creative thinking, the critical thinking, the analytical thinking, the design thinking. That's what we do. That's how we get paid. So again, turn the company into something different. So there is the competitive benchmarking, all practical advice. I think it is worth considering with care. All right, so let's move to the second one, and let's look at Michael Porter's 5 forces. It's on page 63 in the manual. And you may know this from other courses or even this course. And this is an obvious one for you to use in your assignment. Because your assignment is asking, a critical discussions of company competitive advantage, Okay, so you can use Porter's work, no problem at all. Now, all you need to do is not just draw the diagram, but apply the diagram. Now, let me sort of share with you my view of Porter's philosophy, because we don't need to spend a lot of time on it in the assignment. Just use it as a good touch point to build an argument. That's all. Now, first thing, Porter claims there are 5 forces. The box in the middle, suppliers, buyers, substitute, and new entrants. That's basically it. Now, if I was using Porter's 5 forces, where would I start? And I'd start in the middle box. I want to know what the industry competitors are fighting over. Are they fighting over market share, share of customers, share of wallet, market share? What is it that they're really after? Or are they fighting over market space, market territory, positioning, shelf space? So that's where I would start. I want to know, I look at it in this way. There's a piece of meat and there are 8 dogs all after it. What are they fighting over? They all want to get enough to have a meal. Some of them will take more than others. Some will get bone, some will get flesh. It's exactly the same in commercial life. So what is it that they're fighting over? That's the first thing. Now, the second thing you then got to think about is, how are those industry competitors positioned to get the lion's share? So who is number 1, number 2, number 3? So get an understanding. That's easy. Now, what Porter then says is there are 4 forces that impact that box in the middle. The force coming from customers, which are buyers. The force coming from your suppliers, which is your supply chain. The force coming from close substitutes. It could be local competition. We did a launch projection in Vietnam for WD-40. You probably know that brand. And the substitute product was people were using grease and different types of lubricant to remove rust, waste of time. So in some markets, substitutes are not really substitutes. They are core products to the industry. And then we've got new entrants, new kids on the block that are coming in to spoil the market. Okay. These are not forces as Porter claims, in my view. These are sources of force. It's the source that becomes important, not the force. Because I want to know not the the threat of new entrants. I want to know who are the new entrants, the source. Where do they come from? Where do they speak? Where do they speak? Where do they speak from? Who's backing them? And the same thing, well, substitute products. And then if I'm looking at the buyers, what is the source of purchasing? Is it a B2B market, a B2C market, a B2G market? Or is it even the other way around? Is it a C to B market? Is the customer defining the business? That's already happening now with online sales. Now, that's what I would call first touch. That is very quick. It's just a few lines. Now, what becomes much, much more important is this. What Porter talks about in his academic papers is a concept, and you can find that in my books on marketing, of which there are many written. I think one was 2 years ago, called Marketing Management Models Explained in Detail in that. But Porter's work talks about one important concept, which you must never ever forget. It's the concept of switching cost. What is the switching cost? So if a buyer is buying from the stuff in the middle of that box, what would cause them to easily go to a substitute or easily go to a new entrant? Now that's what competition is about. Holding your market share, preventing customer defection, preventing customer value erosion. That's the way I look upon this. So what are the switching costs? What we want to do is to make the switching costs so high that people won't jump to the competition. You see, you look at your MBA program. I mean, I know that I designed it and I'm very proud of it. And we've had huge volumes of people going through it all over the world. But the switching costs for you are very high. Once you start on a program, you decide to discontinue, you lose a ton of money. But let's go a bit further. Let's assume you're halfway through and you now want to jump ship from one university to another. Will the other university credit your assignments? No, very difficult. Credit transfer, quite difficult to achieve. In practice, very difficult to achieve because universities are proud about their respective and differential standards. Tough. You're locked in until you graduate, but you're okay with that because you're having a good experience, I hope. This is what switching costs are about. So in business terms, it's about winning customers, keeping customers coming back. Keeping customers coming back. Why? Because we don't want to have low switching cost. We want a high switching cost. So psychologically, we've got to have the mind share to get market share. That's what this is about. Now, what to me is also important work, apart from switching costs, is bargaining power. And that's a very, very useful term for you to have in your portfolio of MBA vocabulary. Where is the bargaining power? Who has the bargaining power? And what is the strength of that bargaining power? So in my concrete business in Hong Kong, the bargaining power is with the buyer. They can go somewhere else. It's just concrete with stones inside called aggregate. There's no bargaining power from the supplier. Now, one thing we see that is very interesting in large organizations, and you know, Coca-Cola being an example of that, is if Coca-Cola in the middle, they have invested upstream in their manufacturing plants So they don't run into this problem of bargaining power whereby the manufacturer plays them out. Let me share another example with you. We had 2 offices in Hong Kong for about 7 years. And with the problems that there were in Hong Kong with China and all the rest of it, we decided to close the business because the pressure was affecting the business. So we closed, and it was not an easy decision because business is very good in Hong Kong, and I enjoyed very much working there. But one thing that occurred to me, in the Hong Kong market, is that if we don't tie in your suppliers, the suppliers are very capable of going to your competitors and playing you out. And it's something that I was aware of. So one student group formed a new business as an entrepreneurship business as part of their MBA project, their final project. And they wanted to get into the cosmetic business because the lady was an industrial chemist, and her husband, was quite entrepreneurial. So they decided with a group of 4 or 5 of the students to open a new business, creating a new skin whitening cream. And you've probably heard this brand called New Skin, or some of the ladies will anyway. So, okay, it was a very similar product to New Skin. Basically, it's acetic acid taken out of pineapple, added into a lanolin cream. You apply it to your face, leave it on for 20 minutes, and it will cause the skin to react to make the skin look more pale, more like a porcelain doll, as it were. And this was very fashionable and still remains fashionable in the Hong Kong market and the wider China market. So now they want to set up business, and they said, can I help? So I said, well, okay, I'll give you some free advice, but the first thing we need to do is to think about market, think about channel. My advice to you is that we produce this, we get some pilot runs going, and we put it into a multi-level marketing channel, which I can connect you to, which we did. I said, now, you're forming a new business. What you don't have is a manufacturer. Yeah, okay. Now, you can have a manufacturer, and we can find manufacturers in Hong Kong or China, but I suspect it's better to go offshore. I can find it in Switzerland because I work in Switzerland. I can find it for you in Australia. They said, well, Australia is probably nearer than Switzerland, and we're not very happy with the Swiss language, the German, etc., etc. And so I said, okay, fine, Australia it is. I will set you up with a manufacturer. So now you have a business, you have a channel, you have a product, you have a supplier. And by going into a multi-level market, you'll have customers very fast. So it's a gift. Now, promise me one thing. Your supplier that I'm putting you in touch with, you must give them a shareholding in your business, because you must tie up your supplier. Which they said, yeah. But when business starts, greed sets in. And I'm sure they had a discussion amongst themselves. Why should we give our supplier shares? They're already making money from us. You see? Okay. Our business went up. I think in the first year it was about 10 million Hong Kong dollars. It went up to 70 million. It really, really escalated big time. The supplier in Australia is also very smart. He said, why should we continue supplying these people and earning X when we can earn X times 3? So the supplier's bargaining power was very, very high. The business collapsed. You see? So I just want to share with you the importance of Porter's contribution with the terms rather than the model. The model I don't have any respect for in any real terms, but the concepts I do. The concept of switching costs, the concept of bargaining power is very, very, very important. So I call this today end-to-end integration. I want to tie up the business end to end, because as it ramps up, I don't want to get played out. So this is something which I'm just sharing with you, practical experience, rather than what you're going to find in Porter's work. He doesn't share in that basis, and his papers are good, but they're tending to be more sort of academic, where he talks about industry margins and stuff like that. So now you can use Porter's work for your client. Talk about where the source of threat is coming from. Talk about the source of bargaining power, but also the weight of that bargaining power. And therefore, what should be the strategy? Excuse me, running out of voice. And therefore, what should be the strategy? Okay, so I think you understand that. I think it's all explained in the manual, but you don't need to go into a lot of detail. You don't have that many words to share, but it's the, you see, the beauty of these academic models and framework is what I call their heuristic quality, the ability for you to ask questions and to change and modify and realign your thinking. Okay, let's move on. Customer analysis, I think this is relatively straightforward. Basically, with customer analysis, I'm concerned with segmentation. I want to know who are the buyers, where are they located, what motive will induce purchase, and can I profile my customers in such a way that I can run the sales and profit through those customer groups and deal with them on a segmental basis. I think that is all we really sort of need to do. But as we move forward, from a strategy point of view, there are a few things that I think are worth raising. Could somebody turn off their microphone, because we got some back? Thank you very much. Got a bit of feedback. Okay, so other things are the types of analysis that is important is resource and capability analysis. Now, I think you've got the idea, because I've already explained to you about what it's about. Now, in your assignment, task number 5 says, in light of your discussion of tasks 1 to 4, analyze and evaluate the resource implications of your recommendations. So, in other words, what are the resource consequences? What are the resource needs? Okay, so if I can fast forward you to page 76, 77, and 78, I've given you an audit framework, how to do a resource audit. Okay, so this will serve you very well for question 5 in your assignment. It's all done for you. All you need to do is to be selected. So when we're doing our resource audit, we need to assess the capabilities, competency, and constraint. Could you mute your microphone, please, whoever it is? Thank you very much. So I've broken this audit down in terms of management and people, operations, products and services, marketing and finance. I think it's enough. So on page 76, you'll find the resource audit. So what I don't need to do is to go through all of the detail in here. But now what we need to think about is in the question. It says, analyze and evaluate the resource implications of your recommendations. Okay, so in task 4, you're going to be able to identify strategies, whatever they may well be. The answer is no, it's not in the PowerPoint, in the manual, page 76. So you've come up with your ideas, your proposals, your strategy. Now, what is the resource consequence? I think what they've asked you to do is to analyze and evaluate. I don't think that's terribly clever. I think what we really do is look at the resource consequences. If you're putting together a strategy, I always use this word consequence. What are the consequences? What are the consequences of your strategy? Now, what we're really saying is, what are the consequences of your strategy for your assignment? So what are the consequences in terms of management and people? Now, I also want to share with you a different perspective. I have just written a new book, which is here. It's called Transforming Leaders. Okay, this has just been out about 2 months ago. And you can get this on Amazon or on Kindle. And it's written by myself and Clive Smallman, who was at Judge Institute at Cambridge University. Because I feel that in management, we can't just be talking about this stuff unless we talk about leadership. So in my mind, and having been around the consultancy game for such a long time, one of the issues and problems that we have is a lack of leadership. And in several organizations that I've been working with recently and one currently, I'm proposing that we set up a leadership development program to supplement the resource provision. Because the consequences of staying in business and remaining in business and being sustainable in business, we can have this strategy, but if it's not led, how are we going to move forward? So when I put this audit together, I talked about management, I talked about culture, I talked about employees, etc., etc. But I didn't lay sufficient emphasis to leadership. It's we have the head of organizational transformation for Malaysia Post on another program, which I was running last year, which is now finished, and he's already completed, him and his staff. But he said to me something very interesting in a class discussion once. He said, we put in a lot of transformation, we put in a lot of change, we innovate, we do all sorts of interesting things, but we've had something like 7 or 8 changes of CEOs in the last 5 to 6 years. And in fact, the new CEO even come in this week from DHL. Now, when you get leadership change at the top of the organization so frequently, it's very, very destabilizing. And people tend not to want to listen anymore. They just want to lead business as usual. So my question to you is, if we start putting in together new strategies, is the culture ready to accept it? And is the leadership there to support it? You see? So these are the type of things that you can bring up in your answers to question 5. So I've given you, an audit of people, operations management, product, services, marketing, finance. I mean, it's only a beginning, but it does give you enough. All you need to do is to be selective and possibly pick up 8 important points. Enough already, job's done. Now, on page 79, which is a few steps forward, I want you to look at this diagram quite carefully. This is something that I created when I put the manual together, which I believe in sincerely. So it's figure 5.1 on page 79. And I've called this the I've called this the route to strategy through resourcing and core competence. So can you begin to see resources drive capability? Capability drives competitive advantage and strategy determination. But without resource adequacy, that's the jargon I use, without resource adequacy, how can we achieve strategic competitive advantage? So now you begin to see the flow. So that is why a resource audit is terribly important before we move on. And I've come to realize in recent years the importance of working culture. Because if the working culture is not going to support change, not going to own change, not going to internalize that change, not going to drive it, we're wasting our time. Some of you are probably working in very sluggish organizations. And the reason being is because business has been okay, it's operated okay. But actually now, with the environmental change, those organizations are having to respond and really shake up. Okay, so let's move on to the value chain. And that is explained on page 80. But the important thing is the diagram on page 82. So if you can locate that, that will be very useful. Now, this is yet another contribution from Porter. We've seen his life forces, and pretty much at the same time, in the 1980s, he put together this generic value chain. Now, this again was a big contribution to management theory, and it has a lot of value. So let me explain to you now how Porter's value chain actually works. His approach says that there are two sources from which value is created in business. The primary activities that convert inputs to outputs, and the support activities that are needed to enable the conversion process from input into output. So that's basically the thinking. The contribution of them both together produces an operating margin. And that's the idea behind it. If you want to produce a specific value chain for your business, your primary activities that convert inputs to outputs will be different. Some may be the same. Your support activities, some will be different. Some will be the same. Some may have more support activities than others. If you take a university, primary activities are going to be recruitment, onboarding, program delivery, assessment, graduation. It's quite short. The support activities are going to be much deeper because the administration, the infrastructure, the HR, the technology, the finance, the support activities in the university are much deeper than the primary activities. It's an imbalance, actually. And that happens in quite a lot of large bureaucratic organizations. Good. So It's a very straightforward process. All you need to do is to populate that diagram with content and say this is what it is. Now, that's not MBA level, that's at the undergraduate level or less. What becomes important is what can we learn about the value chain. Now, what you can do, if you so wish, is to look at dependency. So if we just take one of these things and we look at operations management, to what extent is it dependent on procurement? You can extend the line. To what extent is it dependent on human resource management or infrastructure of the firm? Much less. So you can start to do an impact analysis inside the value chain to work out where the points of interaction are critical. I call this linkage logic. So where is the linkage logic in the firm? What do the primary activities depend on to support them? Okay, linkage logic. You can extend the lines through. That's the first thing that we do. And then the next thing that I like to do with Porter's value chain is to work out where we are better than the competition. Where do we have differentiation advantage? The way in which that can be done, I've shown in 2 pages later, on page 84, to show you how to do differentiation advantage through the value chain. And what you need to do here is simply to identify where we are better. So, for example, if I take something like the support function of infrastructure, we are in a market leadership position. We have an information system that supports innovation through close coordination. We have a customer-centric culture. You see, all of this is where you are differentiated. So this is how you put together differentiation advantage in the value chain. Now, go back to my thinking on critical success factors and key success factors. The industry success factors is you are going to be a player in this business. What's going to keep you in business is the extent to which you are differentiated in the mind of the customer. And your differentiation is going to depend on value propositions. Emotional value propositions related to the brand, price value propositions, product performance valuation propositions, contextual value propositions, and so on. Those value propositions are where you are going to be different from the rest, not the same as the rest. So this is how you put together your differentiation advantage. So differentiation advantage and competitive advantage, it's the same thing. So in task 2, it says, give us a critical discussion of the company's competitive advantage among its competitors. You use the value chain exactly as I've shown on page 84, annotated. There's your answer. So that's almost a cut and paste job, but you need to make sure that it's contextual to your scenario and your background statement. Okay, good. Now, what has to be thought about beyond that is this differentiation where we are different and that difference is meaningful? Is it sustainable? So it's all very well and good to think about competitive advantage or competitive disadvantage. But I want to know, is this differentiation sustainable? So if you want to make your assignment really interesting, I'd identify these differentiations as I've shown here in the diagram, and then probably just star one of them, or simply put a code 1 to 5 where the organization is really sustainable for the longer term. You see, if you have a look at Top Glove and you see the Top Glove's impact that it's had and provision it's had for PPE equipment across the world during the COVID pandemic and all the rest of it, you know, all the factories around this region are working to full capacity. But then suddenly they get hit by negative publicity. So all that business that has sustainable disadvantage, you know, has been hit. I'm not sure whether that hit still is working, but I know they had tough time quite recently. So this is what I want to share with you. We cannot assume that our differentiation advantage is sustainable. It may not always be. So what we tend to do, if we have the money, is to do some market research, and that's called using tracking studies. We set up tracking studies to track the value of our differentiation amongst our core customer groups, and do it again with potential customer groups to work out, is what we have relevant? So relevance and sustainability go together. So this is the usefulness of the Porter's value chain. See, the Porter value chain is quite useful because you can get a picture of the entire organization on one chart. The McKinsey value chain is different from Porter's value chain. McKinsey's value chain just deals with primary activities. So it just had one long line. So this is interesting, it's quite good. I'd like to just roll you forward to page 86. To looking at value chain coordination. And this is something which struck me as being important. You know, today, companies talk about collaboration. But how do we collaborate? Where do we collaborate? What impact will that collaboration have? And is it sustainable? So we look at the primary activities and see how they link. So this diagram on page 86 was done for Alcan. Alcan manufactures the cans. Their customer is a canner. You can see how the primary activities are linked. They are in a partnership agreement between them. Tyco is a company we've done a lot of work for. They have a similar arrangement with their distributors in partnership, in preferred partnership through integration. So what you need to think about is how in the future, with your future strategy for differentiation and collaboration, could produce what I call value chain bonding, where the value chains of the supplier and the value chain of the retailer, for argument's sake, work together on a JIT basis. You see, what is happening now in the UK, in Marks and Spencer's, Sainsbury's and Tesco's, they are big retailers, but the business that is thriving is food. The problem the food industry is running into is supply chain management, because the supply chain workers are being pinged to go into quarantine because they're in contact with people that have got COVID. So you're finding, I think it was nearly 1 million workers last week were pinged to go home into 14-day quarantine because they've been in contact with other people that got COVID. So the supply chain is under immense pressure. But what Marks and Spencer's have done, because people can't go to the stores and don't want to go to the stores and take the risk, they tie up a joint venture with a Cardio and one or two other companies that will do the delivery end of the business. So you place the order with Marks and Spencer's, they assemble the order, put it together, and Arcadia offers the delivery service, the last mile delivery service, to provide a new business model based on value chain linkages. And what they're doing with the customer end is to get people who want large orders to place the orders 3 to 5 days in advance, so they can then set up the logistics operations for strengthening their supply chain on the one hand and strengthening their delivery chain on the other. So this is how you use the value chain to link up businesses for sustainability. And indeed, if Marks and Spencer's hadn't done this, Tesco's haven't done this, Sainsbury's have not done this, their food retailing business would have folded. The problem that they now face is the supply-demand balance is under pressure. You've probably seen pictures on your phone about supermarket shelves in London being empty. The reason that they're empty is not that customers have bought more, it's that the suppliers can't get the product on the shelf because of labour shortages. But this is an unusual situation, that we are now facing and that we're now in. So these are very, very useful models that you can feed into your assignment. Certainly try to put in your resource audit, use your value chain, use Porter's 5 forces, talk about how competitive advantage can also be sustainable. Okay, let's just move on a little bit more and have a look at other types of models that may be useful. The onion model, the life cycle model, the product portfolio analysis, and the servo analysis. I can see a message coming through, but I can't see all of it. So maybe we can take it up when we close in a few minutes' time. Okay, so these are other tools and techniques that you might want to use. Now, one of your assignment questions talks about competitive advantage, task 2.2, about the organization's competitive advantage. Now, this is where you can use the onion model. If I can refer you forward to page 94, I will show you an example of an onion model that I did for Marks and Spencer. So you can see from that diagram that there's lots of circles, concentric circles. And the idea is this, the metaphor is like this. If you could imagine a very big Spanish onion and you put the knife through it, you'll see there are lots and lots and lots and lots of very nice layers. And that's where the onion model idea came from. In the middle of the onion is that core. If that core is in good condition, it's fine. If it's not in good condition, the onion will rot from the middle to the outside. Now, my reading of that was to use that visual identity of a Spanish onion and convert it into a model for competitive advantage. So the closer you are to the brand, the closer you are to the core of the onion, they are the layers of competitive advantage. And you can use this in your assignment. So for Marks and Spencer's, clearly the brand is the most important thing. But what are the layers of competitive advantage? In the UK, value for money, customer service culture, in-store merchandising, product-focused market share, supply linkages, purchasing systems, all the way through to their sites, which is probably their point of weakness, or where they're vulnerable, because competitors can come in and open stores nearby and win the business. And that's happened in London and in Manchester and Birmingham, places like where Primark has opened very near to Marks and Spencer's and taken a lot of the business away. You know, you can go into Marks and Spencer's, maybe you pay £50 and you buy 2 shirts, 3 if you're lucky. You go to Primark with £50, you end up with a whole suitcase of shirts, which you can keep filling because everything is sold so cheaply. So Primark would attack Marks and Spencer's site locations. Mothercare, the same thing. So what you've got to ask yourself from a strategist point of view is, what are our lines of competitive defense? How many lines of competitive defense do we have? Because if they're not very many, your onion is not reducing. And we're going to end up running a business without a lot of competitive edge. Your competitive advantage, your competitive differentiation goes into the onion model to show visually just how big the lines of competitive defense are. If we're in a very competitive market, the onion might be quite small. So if I want to have a look, there's 2 onions, the good onion and the bad onion. The bad onion is shown on the next page. Now, I've done this at Marks & Spencer. I used to work at Marks & Spencer, so I know this, you know, from experience as an employee. At the middle of the bad onion, they have a very conservative corporate culture. And I think that's what held them back for many years. Managerial inflexibility, you have to follow the rules to the point of madness. You know, when I was working there, we have an SOP manual for every job function. This is what you must follow. If you break the rules, you're in trouble. It's amazing. So, and as a result of which, employee engagement could be improved. So, but you've only got 3 or 4 negative points. Most of this is competitive advantage. You may know Tan and Tan here, the builders, a very famous developer, one of the early developers here in Malaysia. I did some work for them in the early years. And I was involved in the development of Sukasa in Jalan Ampat. After they finished with Mikasa, which is a very successful project, Sukasa was built. And Sukasa was not a very successful concept because it was a hybrid concept. It didn't work very well. So in order to get the message across, using the onion model, the bad onion was bigger than the good onion. So I came to realize that something's wrong with the service, the product. There's so much competitive disadvantage here. We need to rethink this. So as you know now, Sukasa has been rebranded into the Nomad Hotel, a whole rebranding operation, new segmentation strategy, and it's now doing okay. So why? Because competitive disadvantage outweighed the competitive advantage. So this is where the onion model comes in quite useful. It's not very scientific, but it gets the message across. Good. Well, we've still got 1 or 2 models, etc., to have a look at when we come back. And that won't take us very long. And then we'll move into setting a strategic direction, which is now in the core of my strategic management module. And it will also help you directly with your assignment. So I'm just about running out of voice, as you can probably hear. I need to take some throat lozenges and some sprays or what have you to get my voice back. I look forward to seeing you a bit later. I think, Mohan, it's at 2 o'clock we're starting again, isn't it?
It's at 2 o'clock sharp.
2 o'clock sharp. So I look forward to connecting with you for our final session today, 2 o'clock start. Our agenda will be looking at finishing off the environmental analysis, but the main agenda this afternoon is to be looking at strategic direction. Okay? So that links directly into one of your questions. See you at 2 o'clock. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy your lunch break. Okay? If you haven't looked at DHL, please look at DHL because I will be referring to it this afternoon. Thank you, everybody. I think we're making good progress. We're exactly where we need to be. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. See you.
Thanks, doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Prof.
Thank you, doctor.